All right, let's go back to this now. It's our breaking news story at this hour. The High Court in Pretoria has declared the Arto Amendment Act unconstitutional and invalid. That's the new demerit system for traffic offences. The organisation Undoing Tax Abuse brought the case, pointing out, among other things, that the system is administratively complicated and relies on a chaotic municipal system. Phase 1 of the system was implemented in July last year. The system was expected to become fully operational by July this year. Judge Annalie Basson declared the entire act and its amendments invalid. Well, Arto is, of course, welcoming the ruling. The organization's Stefanie Fick joins me now for a further discussion. Stefanie, thank you for joining me. So last year, the first phase of Arto coming into place, but before we could even move into second gear, the wheels seem to be coming off at this point. Break it down for us, Stefanie. What led, from your arguments as Arto, what led to the point where we are, where Judge Annalie Basson has said, actually, not just aspects of the Arto Amendment Act, the entirety of the Act is constitutionally invalid?
I'm going to start by saying that I think in the beginning, when we were really part of this process right from the start, and right from the start we realized that the Amendment Act specifically is very unpractical. And then keeping in mind that it is an administrative burden, and then the question whether, the RTIA and the department will be able to deal with this administrative nightmare was also a question. But then we realized as we, went along that the act, both acts, are unconstitutional. And to summarize is the separation of powers. That the Arto and the Arto Amendment Act is heavily reliant on national telling province and the local governments how and what they should do. And we are saying that that's unconstitutional and invalid. And that is what the court agreed with us, is that, national can't usurp the constitutional duties of a local government, and that needs to be separated. So what it means is just back to the drawing board. The Arto Amendment Act was signed by the president, but it hasn't been enacted yet. So it's only the Arto, the original Arto Act, that was sort of applicable in Tshwane and Joburg. And I think in all fairness, hasn't really been successful because of this administrative nightmare. And just looking at how people are now struggling because a machine is broken and they can't renew their licenses. On a practical level, it is maybe a good thing. We need legislation that will stop the carnage on our roads. But Arto, the administrative nightmare, is not going to do it.
So given that, a declaration of an act as being constitutionally invalid depends on the final, confirmation by the Constitutional Court, after this High Court outcome, what's your understanding of what's the legal situation at the moment? As I come out and drive now at the end of this show, should I be keeping Arto in mind as the act that is applicable and with the attendant consequences? Should I violate the traffic laws, or should I drive knowing that Arto is out of the question at the moment?
I think you should drive like Arto is out of the question, but just remember, Arto is an administrative process. This does not give people license to not abide by the law. In other words, the crimes, the law, the fact that you must drive a certain speed, that you can only park, in a certain spot, the fact that you can't drive drunk, those are still crimes and they are still there. It is just the way that the RTIA deals with giving you a fine, infringement notice, courtesy letter. It's just that process that's off the table now. So beware. The Arto Act being unconstitutional and invalid doesn't mean that there is now lawlessness on our roads. Mm-hmm. A metro policeman can still pull you off, can still give you a ticket. The process to follow is just they can give you a ticket, with a fine. They can still fine you, and you can still be held accountable for acting irresponsible. The acts did not go away. The crimes did not go away. It's just that whole administrative process, which not a lot of people understood in any case, is now back to the drawing board for government to decide whether they want to go with this elaborate administrative process.
Just go back to that point around what was really problematic with the Arto Amendment Act. In what way was it amounting to, the national sphere of government usurping the powers of provincial and local government? In what way was it doing that?
In a nutshell, our constitution is quite clear that, there's certain things that local government can do, and that national can't tell local government what to do, and some of that is traffic and parking. Now, what the Arto and the Arto Amendment Act was doing is that you can only, the RTIA, the agency, if you get a ticket, you need to, there's this infringement notice, you can make representations to the RTIA, which is the national body, and then if you are unhappy with the ruling, this appeals tribunal that's part of the new Amendment Act is also a national body. So immediately it takes away local government's right to say, for example, what do we do with people that park illegally? If Arto remain, then the local governments and the provincial governments, although they have certain constitutional obligations, has to listen to the national government, who will now make decisions for them.
I get it. I get what you're saying. So what would then lead us to a point, Stefanie, where we have effective legislation that, as you said at the start of this conversation, stops the carnage on our roads and increases compliance with the rules of the road, but that is not administratively burdensome and constitutionally problematic in the way that you've demonstrated Arto to be? What would be the key features of such legislation?
Difficult to say, because you know what, it's not about just bashing all legislation. It's about just making sure that legislation is constitutional. I think everyone will agree. I don't think that legislation is necessarily the first port of call going forward. But if government wants to work on new legislation, please just invite all civil activist organizations and listen to the advices. But you know what comes to mind is more visible policing. How do we catch a drunk driver? How do we catch the person that is parking in the wrong spot? So one is a very serious offense and one is a lesser offense. How do you catch the guy that, drives 250 kilometers on the highway? You need a person to sometimes write a ticket, except for cameras. A lot of the other, contraventions, you need the intervention of a person. What about more visible policing? What about spending more money and creating jobs and getting more people on our roads in order to implement our laws that's already in existence? We don't need an elaborate administrative system. Just implement the laws that we have and spend money in areas where it's needed.
Lastly, Stefanie, let me ask you to weigh in on this situation. I don't know if you have, and you'll forgive me if you have already weighed in, around our card printing machine, one machine that prints all our driver's license cards, being in Germany at the moment. And the Germans, they had a holiday in December. They didn't get around to fixing our machine. And as a result, if your license card expired, well, tough luck.
It's actually, I sometimes think, I don't know if I want to laugh or want to cry, because it's so unfortunate. And, I hope the person that's responsible for this will be held to account in all fairness. But this is, again, governments sometimes need help. It doesn't help always being negative and bashing government for everything. They can't be 100% right all the time. But what is, what I think bothers us is the fact that this is an administrative process which you can't administer. And now you want to introduce a very cumbersome administrative process. So the question is, would you be able to deal with it? Because what you have now created, in fact, if you really think about it, you want to create law-abiding citizens. You want motorists to abide by the laws. You want to use Aarto, and they've said this before, in order to educate people and by giving them demerit points, making sure that they abide by the laws of the road. But what you have created here is actually criminals, because you are forcing people now they can't renew their licenses. Or it's a money-making scheme, because the next thing is you have to apply for a temporary license and it's going to cost you 90 Rand. And that is really not what this is about. It is about, we need to have laws that we can abide by and that the government can administer. And it's not so irrational that it put motorists in an awkward position. I mean, government should govern in the best interest of South Africans.
Yeah. Absolutely. Stefanie Fick, thank you for your time. She is, of course, from Arto, the organization undoing tax abuse. But on a serious note, that situation with the license card printing machine being in Germany, perhaps the minister and her team can actually make a habit of updating us from time to time. How far with that situation? Many, many people are waiting to get their license cards. And also, just jokes aside, I don't know how many card license printing machines you need to print tens of thousands of license cards. So, maybe I'm making too much out of the fact that only one in the country and it's out in Germany. But perhaps it could be that it's so powerful you actually need just one.